This is the I Will Teach You a Language podcast, episode 180.
Welcome to the I Will Teach You a Language podcast. Weekly motivation and language learning tips to help you become fluent in any language. Now, here's your host, Ollie Richards.
Good morning, everybody. You're in for a real treat today. We've got a fantastic in-depth discussion all about the link between music and language learning. It's a two-part episode. It's kind of long, so I'm not going to waste any time. We're going to get right into it. Before we do, though, I'd like to thank the fantastic sponsors of the show, the one language company I could not live without. It's italki, and it's the place where I get all of my lessons, my language lessons, all my speaking practice, everything. It's amazing. And you can get a free lesson by going to iwillteachyoualanguage.com/free lesson. Now let's dive into today's conversation. I'm talking with Fiel Sahir from New York. He is an accomplished musician. He's actually finishing off his music degree right now. And we talk about the much lauded link between music and language learning. Does having a musical background make you a better language learner? Is there any connection at all? It's super interesting, and I began the conversation by asking Fiel to talk a little bit about his background.
My dad was a guitarist at some point in his life, and so that was always around the house. And being a child of immigrants, money to pay for music lessons is not exactly a priority. So my mom said, let's just take lessons with dad, and which wasn't easy, but it was a good thing in the end. And so that's how I got started with classical guitar. And somehow
is that your main instrument, classical guitar?
Yeah, classical guitar.
Okay.
Yeah. And so that's where I'm at now. I finished my undergrad at the New England Conservatory in Boston, and now I'm in Germany studying over there. But going on with languages, they sort of tie in together because I have this love for people and different cultures just so much. And music and language are both part of the whole culture bubble, so to speak. And so when I was 10, I was in a car ride coming home from vacation with family and family friends. And we're Indonesian, and being an Asian American in the States is not very easy. You know, you get made fun of. And so I didn't want to be Asian per se.
Is that just New York, or is it everywhere?
Well, I would say a lot of the time there's tons of videos online of people complaining about their heritage online, which I want to help fix so that people can understand each other more. So I think it was pretty much across the board. Yeah. And especially with Indonesian, because one, nobody knows where Indonesia is and they've never heard it before. So they automatically see my face and think I'm Chinese, which ethnically I am. I'm the 6th generation outside of China. But as a kid being raised in a household that speaks Indonesian, you don't want to be labeled as such. And so we're in this car ride, and it was really boring. It's only 2 hours, but as a 10-year-old, it's, are we there yet? Are we there yet? And then the whole car ride, they were just cracking jokes, all the adults in Indonesian, and I was very frustrated because I didn't understand anything. But I knew it was funny, just didn't understand. And my dad tried to translate, but every time he translated one, there was 2, 3 more, so we just kind of gave up after a while. But then I resolved, you know what? I want to laugh. I want to be part of the conversation, and I want to enjoy it. This is family. This is what life's about, laughing, not laughing. And so that's how I started, basically.
Okay, so your parents spoke to you in English?
Yeah.
Okay. How do you feel about that?
They wanted to make sure that I knew that I was American. So this is funny, but most immigrant parents will tell their kids they are from X country rather than where they're born or where they grow up. And it actually produces a reverse effect. So the odd thing is with me and my sister, we both speak Indonesian now, while other people that were told they were Indonesian from birth don't. Yeah.
Okay. This is we could really go off on a tangent, but we're not going to, because we're going to stick to the topic today. But let's definitely come back to that another time. So a few rapid fire questions then. You started learning your first foreign language when you were how old?
So I got inspired at 10 at that car ride, but I finally started when I was about 13-ish, I think, when I went to Indonesia for the first time in a while.
When did you start playing the guitar?
That's a rough question. I started with forced lessons at the age of 5, and but they were about 5 minutes every 2 or 3 days because I just absolutely refused to. My dad tried everything he could, but I was a rebellious child. So that's a rough estimate.
How many languages
Yeah.
do you speak now?
Depends on who you're talking to. I would say a basis of 5 that I can totally converse in and be fluent in. I do speak a little bit of Dutch and Portuguese, and I'm working on Italian using Benny Lewis's book, which I think is great.
Okay,
Yeah.
and so the 5 languages that you're comfortable in are English, obviously, Indonesian,
French, German, and Spanish.
Okay, cool. A lot of similarities with my story there, actually, apart from the mixed heritage thing. I'm kind of white British, like, through and through.
There's nothing wrong with that.
It's a bit boring, but but yeah, it is what it is, right?
Right.
And so in terms of music, so my main instrument is piano, and I started playing piano when I was 6, and I had lessons pretty much every week for my whole childhood. Wanted to give up many times, went through periods of hating it. My mum forced me to continue. I'm very glad she did. I was learning classical piano, right? But then when I was 16, I discovered jazz.
Right.
And I kind of went crazy about jazz, and then ended up going to music college. I went to a conservatoire in London to study jazz piano.
Which one?
The Guildhall School of Music.
Okay, yeah.
And drama.
Well known.
Yeah. So I did a jazz piano degree there for 4 years, and then went off and played professionally for quite a few years after that. And then the music gradually died away for me as I discovered various things. We'll get into that later. So now are you still studying, or do you play professionally, or?
Yeah, so I'm doing my master's right now, but it's kind of a rough spot because I'm trying to build a blog currently, and because I just kind of, I mean, if my friends heard me say this, they'd probably shoot me, but I feel that classical music in and of itself is very limiting. It's a very niche audience, and it doesn't impact the world. And I forgot who said it. Oh, I think, what's his name? Makoto Fujimura, this Japanese painter based in the New York metro area. He said, art is beautiful, but it's not necessary. And that's what makes it beautiful. And so as great as music is, I'm kind of leaving that, just like you did, to kind of inspire people and speak in a language they do speak, which is unfortunately not music.
Sure.
Yeah.
I guess the major difference there in our two stories, because we both started playing music about the same time, both at our parents' behest. I think the guitar's a little bit different because the guitar physically is extremely challenging for young kids, whereas the piano is not. You just have to kind of press a key and you get a sound. With the guitar, because I also play the guitar and I taught guitar for a while as well. The precision and the muscle strength you need in your fingers of both hands is really tough. And typically I think that you don't tend to start playing the guitar as a child until quite a bit later. Right? It's a bit like singing. I mean, most professional guitarists I know, they started when they were kind of maybe 10. It wasn't not that young compared to a lot of others. So the major difference with us then is that my language learning started when I was 19. I really didn't, because I grew up in an environment with no foreign languages at all, other than the odd kind of family trip to France, where we would all kind of massacre ordering the baguettes every morning. I had no exposure to languages at all, so it all happened all of a sudden for me, and I had to kind of not only discover how to learn languages, but also why to learn languages. I guess you had a pretty solid reason, pretty clear reason from an early age, didn't you? So okay. So we're talking about music and languages, and it's interesting that you already feel that you're moving away from music and towards languages. I mean, that's certainly what happened to me as well, although it took a lot longer for me. I really wasn't sure what I was doing for a long time. I'd always been learning languages since I was 19, but it took me quite a long time to come to the realization that actually, this musician's lifestyle is not really for me. Right. But one of the things that I'm always very aware of when I'm learning languages and doing all kinds of things actually is my musical background. Like, I still remember very clearly what life as a student musician was like, and the amount of time that we would spend practicing, the amount of time spent performing, and rehearsing the performance and all these things. I still have that memory is always there whenever I take on any kind of difficult task, such as learning a language. So maybe like by way of starting off this discussion then, let me ask you, how would your language learning have been different if you hadn't had any music in your life?
Okay. So for starters, I would say I'm a very non-disciplined person. And I'm always looking for the easiest way out of things, I think, in general. Even with Italian right now, I'm just using Benny's book and maybe listening to a few podcasts and things. But I'm not putting as much effort as one should. And the thing is with musicians, as you know, Ali, practicing 5 hours a day is actually not enough. And people look at us and go, how do you do that?
Yeah.
But we say, no, it's just not enough. And that's when we learn all these techniques like chunking, which we can talk about now or later, that help us just effectively and efficiently use our time rather than just doing something from beginning to end, which I think many musicians do. And those tend to be ones that don't go far because they spend so much time playing their repertoire over and over. And same for language learners. They feel that as long as they've gone over a dialogue from beginning to end 20 times a day, it'll stick in their brain. But the truth is they have to play with it. They have to, kind of shape how they practice, quote unquote.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that because, to my mind, this is one of the major connections between music and languages, and it's often, I think, when people ask this question, like how has being a musician helped your language learning, I think most of the time what people have in their mind is like accent and
right
and your ear, but actually, I mean, I'm sure that helps, but one of the main things that I feel I've got from music is exactly what you just mentioned, which is the experience of practicing. So you talked about chunking, you talked about 5 hours a day, which for most people doing anything is a crazy amount of time, right?
Right.
Unless it's work.
Right.
So talk more about that, about the role of practice, or what you learned from practice and chunking, as you put it, and how that relates to language learning.
Okay. So I've noticed a lot of people in the language learning community in general, when they hear the word music, they equate it to song. And that's something I think we both agree on is not actually what music is. And so what I would try to do personally is to try and make people realize that it's about using musical techniques. Learn from the musicians themselves, not what they produce.
Why do you say music isn't song? Or song isn't music?
It is, but
because I know what you're getting at.
Yeah?
I know what you're getting at, but I'd like you to expand on that.
Right. It's not limited to songs. So when people think of music, they can name songs off the top of their head. But music is a culture. Music is a time and space, like 200 years ago, whatever it may be. A person from Germany, let's say Bach, walking around. It's more than just, let's say, Rihanna's new hit or something like that, which I don't know what it is. But, because when musicians talk about music, we will ask further what composers you play, which era is your favorite. Do you like Renaissance? Do you like classical? Do you like romantic? But for most people, music is as of the past 3 years. Anything beyond that is old.
So you're talking about the role of music in popular culture, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. So going back to what you were saying before.
No problem. So what I advocate is something I call stealing from musicians in the sense just what art really is not looking only at what your profession has, but what everyone else has as well. And so that's my encouragement to language learners is that they would look at the way we practice, which we can equate to study, look at the way we have technique, which we can equate somewhat to accent reduction, music theory, knowledge can be grammar, ear training can be vocabulary, and those are interchangeable. You want me to go on from there, or? Yeah,
well, a lot of stuff there. I mean, so you mentioned the amount of practice that you do in a day and how you'd use techniques like chunking to actually make that effective. So,
right.
What's the connection there with language learning?
Okay, so let's take out the guitar for a second, and let's say you have a passage. So I think number one thing is when people try to learn a language, they go, oh my God, I have to learn French. Benny talks about this all the time. Don't think I have to learn X language. Think about today I want to order a cup of coffee, or tomorrow I want to go to the grocery store. And so when we break things down, it becomes doable rather than a pain in the butt and fear, like something we fear. So for instance, if I was to take this passage on a guitar, it's an etude by Villa-Lobos, Brazilian composer. Just that first bar. It sounds really complicated. It's really fast. But when somebody hears that, they go, oh my God, that's how I have to play. Oh no, I'm never going to do this. So if you go around looking at French people and seeing the way they speak and comparing yourself to them, so the recommendation is there's 3 things you can do that I highly recommend. 1 is different tempo, 2, different rhythm, and 3, repeating notes. And we know this as musicians. We don't do things from A to Z or Z and over.
Can you explain the difference between tempo and rhythm?
Yeah, so tempo, we would say, is the speed at which you're playing at. So for instance, if you want to play, the original tempo for this is, but you could play it as, just to slow it down so that you can digest what you're doing as you are playing rather than mindlessly practicing. So rhythm, what I would say is what jazz musicians do amazingly is they swing. So for instance, if I was to practice this, I would go. And the whole goal of this whole thing is brain flexibility. That's because when we are able to be flexible, we can fix our mistakes as we're speaking because we're conscious of them. For different tempo, you can use a metronome as well, and experiment between going slower, but beyond normal speaking speed and faster, and then you adjust in between. I'm sure you've done that as well.
So we've got tempo, rhythm, and what was the third one?
Repeating notes.
Repeating the notes. Okay, as a practice technique, you mean?
Yeah.
Can you give us a quick example of that?
Yeah. So instead of again, you'll go. So if I were to do it in English, let's do it in English in a language everyone understands. Is a different tempo would be saying, "Hello, my name is Ollie Richards." So speak whale. Think of Nemo. Speak whale. A rhythm, you could say, "Hi, my name is Ollie Richards." Put a beat on it, and then you just go on from there. Or you can go opposite. Instead of going, "Hi, my name is," you can go, "Hi, my name is Ollie Richards." And so the more we drill these different rhythms, our mouths will be looser, and then we can speak flawlessly, more or less.
And so I think that the tempo thing is kind of evident enough, right? Mm-hmm. Because if you do something slowly, then it's easier to follow what's going on. Right. The point about rhythm is an interesting one, because as I understand it, and as I used to practice as well, music that is, when you put stuff in a different rhythm, when you play around with it, and tell me if I'm following you here or not, but as I understand it, by playing around with rhythm and actually practicing things in a way that aren't correct, but you're just experimenting with a different rhythm, what you're doing is you're kind of creating a bit of flexibility for yourself. You're teaching yourself to manipulate the passage of music that you're actually practicing, which makes you more confident with it at the end.
Exactly.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because as we know, when we meet our first person to have our conversation with in X language, target language, we freak out, we get unsettled, we get nervous beforehand, and the same thing happens when you go on stage. We have stage fright, and so when you practice things differently, what you're doing is practicing essentially mistakes that could potentially happen on stage, that your brain will have already rehearsed, and thus you can go back and spring to how you're supposed to play.
Right. And this is, I guess, exactly what Rachmaninoff was getting at when he said that in order to truly know a piece for the piano, you have to be able to play the right hand part with the left hand and the left hand part with the right hand equally well. Or, I mean, I don't know, equally well, but you have to be able to do it, because only then are you fully in control of or fully aware and inside the music that you're trying to play. Not that you would ever play the left hand part with the right hand, but it's the fact of learning to do that that takes you from a point of only kind of having this surface level knowledge of something to the point where you know it so deeply that, you know, you could be in the middle of playing of a performance on a piano in a concert hall in front of 2,000 people. You could have like a cat jump up on the piano, run past you, and then like totally distract you. But you know it so intricately that however badly your concentration is shot, you are always going to be okay, and you're always going to be able to get back and continue because you just have that deep intrinsic understanding of what you're playing from a harmonic perspective, from a rhythmic perspective, from a structural perspective. Like in a song, for example, learning the lyrics to a song, knowing one of the hardest things in learning a song is actually remembering which bit comes next. Sounds obvious, right? But actually, it's the second that you stop concentrating is when you're at risk because you know, you could have verses with different variations and you have to keep track of what comes next, right? So again, just to continue giving examples, one of the things that I often do when I'm learning songs or learning speeches or monologues or something like that is I often practice it backwards. So if you've got like something with 8 lines in it, once I think I know the piece or the speech or whatever the right way consecutively from beginning to end, I'll start at the end and work backwards. So I'll say line 8 and then I'll say line 7 and I'll say line 6, because you are coming at it from all these different angles, which forces your brain to stop thinking linearly and to look at it from lots of different angles, so that you kind of have this this overall complete holistic understanding of what you're playing. And it's not just muscle memory, which is another big risk for musicians, right? You kind of you practiced a piece 200 times, you think you know it, but actually it's just the muscles that remember where to go. If you get distracted or you have a momentary lapse in concentration, and your muscles lose their place, you risk not being able to get back there if you're relying on the muscles alone and you don't have the kind of mental understanding of what you're doing.
Yeah.
So I've just said a whole bunch of stuff. So do you want to react to what I've just said?
I think you hit the nail on the head. For more encouragement for people, language learners, there are people, you know, professionals, like let's say Pablo Casals. I know he had a huge, the cellist, he had a huge problem with stage fright, a huge problem. And he is one of the world's most famous cellists in history, but every time he would just freak out. And even him, and he's performed pieces multiple times, made tons of recordings. Everyone knows who he is. So stage fright is normal, I think, but it's definitely something we can get over as well with time. But the main problem is muscle memory. Yeah. This
is a really nice segue into another area that I think training as a musician gives you a huge advantage in language learning, which is the experience of performance, right? And you know, I remember the experience so many times of going out on stage and having to perform something to people, and you learn to kind of detach yourself a bit, don't you? And you kind of put the music in the foreground. You let the music do the speaking, and you kind of slink off into the background almost, and just play that thing, and let the music be the object of everybody's attention. And to my mind, it's very similar with language learning. You know, when you approach someone, you start speaking to someone, I find that if I practice and I'm good at the language and what I'm about to say, then I find that I can kind of introduce myself in this other language, and let the language do the talking, as it were, so that I don't feel necessarily too embarrassed or too self-conscious being in that position, trying to speak this other language. Because I think because of the training of playing music in public. So have you noticed anything similar in that respect?
Oh yeah. There's something what I call the various stages of filtration in order to help us get over our stage fright, because each time, so if we were, stage 1 is basically us in our room. If we're learning a language, we're alone. We're with our textbook. That's great. And if we go to another stage, then it could be you with your teacher, who you're supposed to make mistakes in front of, right? And you meet them every week. Let's say if you're a musician or doing italki or something, sponsor of the show. But the next stage would be maybe to talk to a friend of yours. That might be a bit uncomfortable, but at least it's somebody familiar. Then your next stage after that would be going out in public and just going to your local Mexican restaurant if you're learning Spanish. And then the last one would be going to the country, the target country. And each time you need to build a certain amount of confidence. And then as you graduate these levels, when you get to the next one, again, you need to build enough confidence to move on to the next one and the next one. For me, there was this one point in my third year of college, my junior year, where somehow I didn't do this on purpose, but I managed to book myself performances for all of April and most of May. And playing 2 or 3 times a week actually took it away. So it was tons and tons of practice in front of people, to the point where it's as simple as brushing your teeth. I think is the main thing that we need to realize is we just need to make it natural and forget and say that it's a part of us rather than something we're learning how to do.
You're talking about the practicing or the performance?
Both. Yeah. Well, I guess mainly performance, because a lot of people complain about stage fright, which is normal. But I've always been taught that as you do it more, it will go away. But it's always somewhat there lingering.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's always there, isn't it? I mean,
yeah.
So, I mean, I've given a lot of talks before at conferences and events and things like that, and I will always get nervous before I get up and give a talk. Always.
Oh no, that's for sure.
No matter how well prepared I am, you know, the only difference is I kind of learned to embrace it, I think, and I learned to kind of feed off the nervousness and use that to create some buzz. And I think the same is true with music. I mean, I guess the thing that I'm thinking at this point is that here's the thing. If we take classical music as a comparison, with classical music, you might take the Villa-Lobos piece, for example, that you just played before. How many hours would you say in total you spent practicing that piece? Ballpark.
Oh, man. I have no idea.
But we're talking hundreds, right?
Yeah, at least.
Many hundreds, if not thousands of hours practicing that piece, because it's a beast, that one. I think I tried to play that, but I was never good enough to play that on the guitar. So here's the difference. Like, in this case, you're spending all this time practicing this one piece. It's the same notes over and over again. The notes don't change. Never.
Right.
But with language learning, it's not the same animal, right? Because the words do change. The grammar does change. The stuff that you say does change. So in the sense that when we come to speak a language with people, you never know what's going to happen. How do you reconcile the difference between learning one piece of music and then learning to prepare for the unknown, which is what speaking a language always is? How indeed. On that note, on that particular cliffhanger, I will leave you to hear the rest of our conversation. Check back in the next episode where we will carry on and talk more about this topic. If you can't wait and you're impatient, you can find the complete video on my YouTube channel. We recorded the video for this as well. Head over to YouTube, type in Ollie Richards, and you will find the recording. Also, if you'd like to read more in-depth thoughts about music and language learning, I've recently written a big blog post about this where I cover a lot of the my main ideas about music and language learning. I'm going to put a link to that in the show notes, so if you'd like to read that, or you'd like to comment on anything you've heard today or leave a message for Fiel, you can go to iwillteachyoualanguage.com/episode 180. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you back in the next episode of the podcast.